recognize the member from Windsor West.
Thank you, Speaker, and I appreciate the comments from my colleague from Toronto-Danforth. The member for Thornhill Hill asked a question about truancy, and I think my colleague from Toronto-Danforth summed it up quite nicely. It shows just how out of touch you are with what is going on in this province. There are numerous reasons why students are unable to attend school. It could be for financial reasons. There are several high school students who have to work in order to support a household, to keep a roof over their head or food on the table. We have a record number of youth under your government that are now accessing food banks when they don't have food, when they're hungry. It's very difficult for them to not only go to school, but then do well when they are there. So when we're talking about accountability specifically, this government has clauses in here to actually absolve themselves from any accountability. And I would like the member for Toronto-Danforth to explain maybe why the government is not focusing on supporting the students in the classrooms, like those with special education needs that are being excluded from schools, but instead focusing on reigning in power for themselves, but also bringing in legislation for them to avoid any accountability for their decisions.
Response.
I appreciate the question from the member. There are a few items here. This is a government that does not particularly want to be accountable. That's my experience. That's what I've seen. It'll be interesting to see what the RCMP have to say when they finish going through the Greenbelt investigation to see what techniques were used. And frankly, I'll just point out again the Premier's actions to protect his phone information from freedom of information says to me that this is a government that does not want to be accountable in any way, shape, or form for its activities. Shutting down a fundamental method to allow the public to understand why and how government makes decisions says to me that respect for accountability is out the window. So why is it that they don't want to be accountable? Maybe they're going to do really bad things.
I recognize the member from Toronto-St. Paul's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to a member from Toronto-Danforth, you mentioned that this whole Bill 101 is about acquiring land. That's the bottom line. Can you maybe explain that and help us understand how those dots connect?
Response.
Thank you for that. I should say that the acquisition of land is not the only thing driving this bill. I think cutting education budgets is another substantial and critical part. But the acquisition of land, let's face it, all of us, schools sit on very valuable property in a variety of communities around this province. And the ability to acquire that property, sell it to a buddy at a really good price so they can make a fortune, has got to be very tempting for a government that is apparently profoundly driven by speculators and land developers. So when you increase their power and decrease their accountability, the potential for land deals that disadvantage the public and make somebody really wealthy who will be happy to come to the next wedding thrown by the Premier is a very real risk. So I appreciate the question, and I think all of us should be very concerned about the potential for loss of control of land.
I recognize the member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, through Bill 33 and Bill 101, this minister and this government is all about responsibility and accountability to the students, the teachers, and the parents. So no, it's not okay to wait for an election to do as the member says, throw them out, when we know that things have gone off the track. So to the member, and that's the entire time that someone could be in high school. So does the member feel that it's okay that a student, the teachers, the parents wait for a system to be corrected in the school board, wait for an election for that correction to happen?
Response.
This is one of the more fascinating questions I've had in my time here, because this is a government that engages in some of the most bizarre behavior I've seen in my 20 years. Under investigation by the RCMP, after the Greenbelt. Should this government have been thrown out? Damn straight. If there had been an election, you would have been in deep trouble. So you're telling me that when it comes to trustees, we should have a higher power overrule them. But when it comes to you and your misbehavior, you should be able to continue on. Should the Prime Minister of Canada be able to reach in to the province of Ontario when he sees or she sees inappropriate behavior and redirect the government of Ontario? Is that what you're saying to me? That governments should be, in fact, kowtowing to the government above them? Is that what you're saying? Because that is the content of their question.
I recognize the member for Niagara Falls.
I don't have a lot of time to get an answer here, but I can tell you one of my staff is a trustee in Niagara. She does a great job. The board does a great job. They've opened up a couple of schools already. But you know how she got that job? I cannot
hear the member asking their question.
You know how
the Minister of Education.
You know how she got that job, Speaker? She got that job to an election. She was the youngest woman ever to get elected in Niagara as a trustee. Does a great job and has opened up a couple new schools. Do you believe that this is nothing more about control rather than elections?
Response.
Well, I think this is about setting aside elections. I think this is a bill about making sure democracy has no impact on the education system.